gentlemen, welcome to a brand new episode of the Virtual Athlete Podcast. On this episode, I'm going to talk about my early NHL 19 thoughts, and later on in the program, I'm going to talk about franchise nation users who walk the line between realism and fun in their franchise modes. But first, this episode of the Virtual Athlete Podcast is brought to you by my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/SnaggleJ, streaming 3 nights a week on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure you go over there, hit me with a follow for all kinds of excellent sports gaming content. So now NHL 19 has been out for a little over 2 weeks, I guess, if you're looking at the early access content, but it's been available to the worldwide population now for almost a fistful of days. I have gotten to sink my teeth into it and have a lot of thoughts. I've been very, very vocal about the game on Twitter. I've been very, very vocal about the game on stream. And I've been enjoying a lot of the conversations that I've been able to have with content creators and with some of the competitive players in the community, just kind of where they feel the game is at, some of the positives, some of the negatives. And I decided that I'm going to dedicate probably the majority of this episode to some early NHL 19 thoughts. Now, take these with a grain of salt. I mean, at this point, I have probably 15 to 20 hours in the game. I think I have enough content and experience with the game that I could perform a proper quote-unquote review of the game if I had to. But this is just going to be more of kind of a different things that I think about, some thoughts. I'm very interested to hear what you guys think of the game. Feel free to jump down in the comments if you're watching this on YouTube. Feel free to hit me up on Twitter at SnaggleJ. Tweet me what you think about the game as well. Like I said, I'm really enjoying my time with it, and I would really enjoy some feedback, how you feel the game has improved, how you feel the game has perhaps regressed in some areas, and just your overall thoughts on the game. So first things first, let's talk about where it really matters, which is on the ice, which I think is definitely a win for NHL 19 versus NHL 18. The skating feels more fluid and more improved, and I think it more mimics what you would expect a one-to-one real-life skating scenario. You can't stop on a dime. You can't turn 90-degree turns unless you have certain players that have, 90-plus in some of the skating attributes. The first thing that I think I recognized when jumping into a quick exhibition game shortly after finishing the download was everything felt very fluid. The motions felt very controlled. But at the same time, they felt chaotic. And I know that that's kind of, maybe hard to wrap your head around, well, how can it be controlled and chaotic? Like, it feels controlled from the standpoint that, your on-screen avatar responds very well to the controls you input. The chaotic part of it is you can very easily put yourself in some bad situations because of that responsiveness. And that's going to come into play on a point we're going to talk about in a minute. But I feel like they've done a great job at fine-tuning the skating. I mean, I felt NHL 17, NHL 18 were, acceptable representations of skating. I felt like there was a certain elastic bandedness to players that really didn't feel realistic sometimes. And I think that was more of a byproduct of holes in their collisions engine as opposed to the actual physics themselves. But I feel like in NHL 19, they've really cleaned that up. Speaking of the collisions and the physics and how it kind of wraps into the whole controls, is, again, the collisions feel a little more realistic this time around. There are more slight, small collisions, rubbing past a player, squeezing between two defensemen that, in previous years the puck would just kind of veer off into a corner. And while they're you notice it especially in those low percentage situations where, again, you're trying to split two D-men, with someone speedy, say Carl Hagelin, for example. I only mention him because he's on our franchise team. So you notice it in those situations, low percentage where you're trying to squeak by a guy on the outside, and when it works, and you actually succeed in one of those low percentage situations, it is a very rewarding feeling. And that's what you want from really any kind of video game, but especially a sports video game. When you put yourself in a low percentage chance to succeed and you succeed, you get that feeling that you were rewarded for taking that chance. And on the opposite side of that, and now this kind of rolls into the AI is very, very good this year. The AI will punish you when you make mistakes. If you put yourself in bad situations, the AI will take advantage of it. The AI does a great job of protecting the puck, moving the puck. I would have to say one negative that I've seen, and this is, again, a continuing legacy issue for the NHL franchise, is CPU passing percentages are just way too high. Consistently, the CPU will complete 90 to 93% of its passes. That's not realistic. You're unable to do that as a user. I don't care how good you are at the game. Completing 90% of your passes is a very, 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 very difficult task. So that is one negative that I hope EA can somehow address. I'm not sure how they would. I know this has been a kind of a thorn in their side for a few years now, that the CPU passing has been way too high. But the CPU is very advantageous when it comes to their opportunities. If you try to skate in 1-on-4 and instead of dumping it in, you end up taking a hit, they're going to turn it around, break out the other way, and put you in odd man situations. They take advantage of their power plays, and again, that ties into the more refined way to play the game. Now, again, my experience primarily comes, in a versus CPU setting, in franchise offline kind of modes, but I have talked to and I have seen feedback from several other creators who, spend their majority of their time in Hockey Ultimate Team against other users, and they have reported the same thing, that the poke check meta is gone now. A lot of people will remember last year, basically the only defense you needed was to be able to poke check, and the really, the odd time you would get a penalty, but for the majority of it, you went unpunished. That is no longer the case. Now you need to be selective with your poke checking. I played a game on stream, an exhibition game against Edmonton. I took 4 penalties in the first 9 minutes of the game on poke checks. You need to be selective. The puck needs to be between you and the defender, or the offensive player who would have the puck. So, that obviously makes sense. If you're going to poke check someone who is protecting the puck away from you, you're at a much higher risk of, getting a penalty, just like in real life. So what that does with the nerfing of the poke check is it really, really, really forces you to play positional defense. The CPU, like I said earlier, the CPU will make you pay for being out of position. So you really need to know, like, if I'm controlling the right D-man, I need to be where the right D-man would be. When the puck is to the left side, I need to be protecting in front of the net. When the puck is on the right side, I need to be protecting, the half wall and down low and getting in the lanes. The NHL 19 forces you to play a smarter game of hockey, both versus the CPU. Again, it's going to be a little less so in, human versus human, because obviously you have a human in control of each sticks. So, one guy could play one way and one guy play another way. But versus CPU, you really have to play smart and play your position. Really limit your use of the poke check and the lift stick. Only to situations where you feel like you would have a high level of success. I said this on Twitter the other day, and I still think after probably 10 to 15 games that this is true. This is the best 5-on-5 versus CPU experience that NHL has ever had, as far as I can remember. I remember in the late 90s, there were a few games where the experience was really, really good. Obviously, in the latter part of the first decade of the 2000s with '08 and '09, it was very good. But NHL 19 provides an amazing replication of hockey versus CPU 5-on-5. I have not talked to a single person who has played 5-on-5 versus CPU who did not think that it was A, an upgrade over NHL 18, and B, a very excellent representation of a game of hockey. Again, there are still some issues out there that need to be resolved. I still think, again, with the CPU passing, sometimes the collision detection with the goalies is a little awkward. There's situations I've seen where you should be drawing interference penalties and you're not. Perhaps that is something that can be fixed with sliders. I'm not sure. I haven't delved into it that far. But overall, the 5-on-5 on-ice experience is very, very good. The additions to franchise mode, which also apply to expansion mode, again, we've trumpeted them on this podcast in the first episode. I've trumpeted them on stream, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on MySpace, on Imgur, on how important these updates were. For me, these updates to franchise mode have set the bar higher for every other sports gaming franchise mode. And that is a big, big comment. But the fog of war element that they have added to this game has revolutionized franchise modes from here on out. If Sony San Diego and the other teams at EA are not trying to figure out how to put fog of war in their game, then I don't know what they're doing. It is an amazing element. So for those of you who may not be familiar with franchise mode and fog of war, or who haven't had the chance to dive into it just yet, basically the fog of war element is not everyone has their full attributes available to you. Obviously, the players on your team do, but draft picks, free agents, other players in the NHL, there is a certain level of unknown. With draft picks, when you start a season and the new draft class is generated, you have nothing. You know a guy's name, where he is from, what position he plays, if he shoots left or right, how tall he is, and what his weight is. And that's it. And that's really all you would know in real life. If I was going to the local rink to scout a guy, I know what they put in the program, what his stats are, how tall he is, what his weight is, what position he plays, does he shoot left or right, maybe where he's from. So there's an element there. Now, how you alleviate the fog of war is by using your scouting team, which the scouting and fog of war combination could very easily be its own mode. I said this on Twitter last week. I feel like NHL franchise mode needs a companion app just for the scouting and the fog of war aspect. Let me control my scouts while I'm on the go. Let me see my scouting reports while I'm on the go. Let me take my 15-minute break at work where I don't have access to my PlayStation or my Xbox or my PC, and let me look over my scouting reports. Not that NHL is available on PC. Sorry, that was a dig at the PC Master Race, sort of. Accidental dig. Apologize. But let me manage that on the go, because you have a team of up to 20 scouts who specialize in regionality. So Scandinavia, the AHL, the NHL, certain divisions within the AHL and the NHL, the US, Canada, Russia. It's incredibly in-depth. They have ratings at all of these. You can send them out to find prospects. You can send them out to scout specific players. You also need to scout NHL players. So the example I keep using is you're in second place at the trade deadline. You need a first-line right winger. You had best be sending your NHL scouts out to scout first line right wingers, because you're going to want to have as accurate as scout ratings as possible. You're not going to trade a future first round draft pick so that you can make a run at the cup this year for a right winger who you only have a little bit of accuracy on his scouting report. And it says he's an 87 and turns out he's a 77. But that can happen. That's the risk reward of the scouting and the fog of war. Another example we use is we drafted a first round draft pick. When you draft someone, their ratings are not always going to be completely locked in. But the way you can unveil more of those ratings, put them in the lineup in the preseason. Let them play some AHL games and their ratings will start to reveal themselves. The bottom line for this all, in terms of the overall experience, is it's amazing. I've said it a million times. Give me more ways to manage my team. You can set all of the fog of war to off if you want. You can set as many of the scouting elements as you want to AI control. So in the overall scheme, it takes what was already a very, very, very good franchise experience and it elevates it to what I think at the moment is probably the best franchise mode in sports gaming. Now, I know before you all clap back with NBA 2K, I don't have enough experience in NBA 2K. I know the franchise mode is very good, but with the limited experience with it I have, for me, the NHL 19 franchise experience is probably the best in sports gaming right now in terms of console-based sports games. Shout out to Out of the Park Baseball 19, #ad. My biggest pet peeve with all of these wonderful additions to franchise mode, and this applies game-wide, one of the biggest pet peeves that people have had with this game is the absolute atrocity that is the menu system. And unfortunately, in NHL 19, it is no better. The menu system is slow, is sluggish, is unresponsive at times, especially on the legacy consoles, the original PS4 and the original Xbox One. And I know people who play on the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X who still encounter menu issues. The NHL EA team needs to find a way. You cannot have, especially for people who play Hockey Ultimate Team. I had a good Twitter back and forth with Jers Network just yesterday about this exact issue. He primarily plays Hockey Ultimate Team. The menu system is the bane of his existence. Constantly bouncing between your inventory and challenges and the auction house and opening packs and just the absolute time that is wasted waiting for menu systems to load. You have to assume that the architecture that Hockey Ultimate Team is based off is not that different than the architecture that Madden Ultimate Team is based off of. And yet, the Madden Ultimate Team menu system is light years ahead of the NHL menu system, both in terms of responsiveness and in terms of functionality. So the menu system, again, I would probably argue and say the menu system was one of the biggest gripes from users from 17 to 18, from 18 to 19, and now from 19 to 20, the menu system has to be addressed. There has to be a better way. You know, they made the change a couple of years ago to go to the tile-based system. It doesn't work. It's too slow. There has to be a way to free up more resources to make the menus move faster. But menus aside, and trust me, I'm not trying to diminish how important the menu system is, especially for Ultimate Team players. But overall, this game is fantastic. NHL 19 is going to be squarely in the Game of the Year conversation for sports games. I think it compares very favorably with some of the other offerings we've had this year that have been, top notch. I think it's right up there with Madden and MLB The Show and NBA 2K and NBA Live and FIFA, which is not even out yet. But NHL is going to definitely be in the sports game of the year conversation. I think it's a fantastic offering. I think especially for a franchise nation community that has become disenfranchised with a lot of other games because of their failures to, make wholesale large improvements. Well, hey, pick up NHL 19. You won't be disappointed in the franchise and the expansion mode. It is fantastic. The experience is great. The nuts and bolts were there last year. Again, there are still improvements that could be made. Free agency could use a little more personality and pizzazz. But, that's minor stuff. When you make wholesale giant changes like the scouting and fog of war. And again, like I said, I kid you not. Fog of war is going to be a focal point for a lot of sports games in the future because it has added so much to the dynamic of the mode. Now, remember, guys, I'm in no way sponsored by EA. I'm not a game changer. I'm not being paid to say this. It's just my honest opinion. And like I said, feel free to drop down into the comments. Feel free to tweet me at SnaggleJ. Let me know what you think. Have you been playing NHL 19? What are your thoughts? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Let me know. Hit me up. I would love to hear your opinion and your feedback. Is there anything that I missed? Obviously, again, I have about 15 to 20 hours in, so I haven't been able to touch every single possible thing that I could touch. But I think I've done a pretty good job in the first 20 minutes of this podcast glowing about NHL and talking about some negatives as well. Speaking of franchise modes and expansion modes, one thing I want to talk about tonight is this kind of spawned from a conversation that I was sort of on the sidelines of on Twitter. It's walking the line between realism and fun in franchise mode. And the reason why this conversation came up is there is some difficulty in the Madden community. Maybe difficulty is not the right word, but struggles, I guess, trying to find that balance between realism and fun in the Madden franchise mode, between the All-Pro and the All-Madden difficulties. The All-Pro experience is not challenging enough for some users, which is why there's a higher difficulty setting. The All-Madden difficulty, unfortunately, the CPU players receive boosts, and there's more evident player warping when they're defending passes. The awareness is tuned a little too high. There is a lot of all Madden slider messing to try to get the game playable, and it ends up becoming a frustrating experience. Players don't want to sit and play 6 to 10 full games editing the sliders every game, trying to find the sweet spot. So then users have to walk the line between the focus on realism and the focus on fun in franchise mode. Now, this segment of the podcast is going to be more of an opinion piece and where I stand on it, because everyone plays franchise mode for different reasons. Some people just want to take their hometown team and win as many games as possible and take them to a title. And if they go undefeated, no matter how unrealistic that may seem, they're happy. Some people want to replicate real life, things that would happen in real life, upsets, good replicated stats, as much realism as possible. And other people kind of fall somewhere in between, where they're only really concerned about win-loss and having a good time. For me personally, and I think this would be evident if you went over to YouTube, youtube.com/SnaggleJ, and looked at some of my archives for our Seahawks Madden franchise, I think we fall somewhere in the middle. We play on All-Pro with very minimal slider adjustments. I am not very good at Madden. I have no problem putting that out there. I don't think there's a single person who is listening to this in their ear holes currently that is shocked by that. I'm 36. I've got slow hands. I've got bad wrists and bad thumbs. I play the game mostly for fun and enjoyment, and my community would probably agree with me. You just need to look at some of the boneheaded plays I make on a weekly basis again and again in Madden. But at the same time, I'm not going for all fun, no realism. So there is a certain modicum of keeping yourself in check. And one thing that there's been a lot of discussion about, especially within the Madden community, is so-called house rules. So, for example, and one of the more popular and more flaunted house rules right now is no switching players on defense. Basically, you pick a player before the play starts, and once that play commences, you do not switch on defense. Now, I have employed the no-switch defense. I typically will control a defensive lineman because I am not very agile and nimble, and I haven't really put the time and effort into controlling a linebacker. And to be honest, when I have 98 overall Billy Wagner in my secondary, I want his attributes to shine through. The CPU knows how to control him, so I let them do the work in the secondary and the linebacker core, and I just try to get to the passer unsuccessfully time after time. That's how I play. I feel like it's a solid enjoyment. I can think back. We streamed Madden. I'm recording this on Monday, and we played Madden on stream last night. We won a game 20-18. We lost a game 18-12. Both very good games, very competitive right up to the end. A lot of fun. I usually use the strategy-based play calls to avoid myself from cheesing plays over and over on offense. But again, I'm trying to balance that line between realism and fun. I don't want to go 4-12 every season. Some people are okay with that. Some people are okay with playing, 5 or 6 years of very below average play, never coming close to winning a title, and they're okay with that. And that's fine, but that's not my jam. I eventually want to win. I enjoy the franchise modes for the general manager aspects of it primarily. The on-field stuff is secondary to me. But the conversation between realism and fun often divides the franchise nation community because what some people fail to realize is everyone is playing franchise modes for different reasons. Not everybody is a hardcore Madden Bomber League user. Or somebody who's going to play 25 years of the franchise documenting every trade, every signing, every stat, that portion of the franchise nation community is of the minority. Whether they like it or not, the uber hardcore franchise people are of the minority. It's one of those situations where they are very vocal about franchise and they carry the torch of franchise nation proudly and fight for the things that they want. But at the end of the day, the franchise user base is primarily dominated by people who fall somewhere in the middle, who want a realistic franchise but is also fun. I would be interested to see what sort of things people do within their franchises to keep it realistic, but without taking the fun out of it. I know some people, have free agency restrictions where they're only allowed to sign one free agent over 80 per this period, or only one free agent over 85 at all, and have to offer an extra year and things like that to try to circumvent what can sometimes be too easy of an experience. We've seen that in Madden. Madden's not always the smartest general manager. We've seen it happen. So I would be interested to see. Jump down in the comments. Hit me on the Twitter at SnaggleJ. I would love to hear what your thoughts are, what you think. What you think about the whole realism versus fun conversation. What side of it do you fall on? What sort of things do you do to keep your franchise realistic while having fun at the same time? I would love to know some of the different things that you guys have going on, because you know what? I'm going to steal your ideas and I'm going to pawn them off as my own, because that's how I roll. Anyways, guys, that is going to do it for this episode of the Virtual Athlete Podcast. If you are listening to this podcast on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell so you get notifications whenever we post brand new episodes. If you are listening to it on Anchor or, fingers crossed, hopefully some other platforms, we have submitted the podcast to several audio platforms, Apple and Google specifically, and then it will branch out from there. If you're listening to this podcast, I do appreciate it. I hope you subscribe in your podcast-catching app of choice. As always, make sure you follow me all over the internet, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook, all at SnaggleJ. Remember, I stream on twitch.tv/SnaggleJ every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday at 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, that'll do it for me, Chris Jardine, a.k.a. SnaggleJ. Until next time, peace.